Sure.
Good evening. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Princeton Council to order. Welcome to this special meeting on December 18th, 2019, dedicated to Princeton's Affordable Housing Plan. Madam Clerk, have we met all the noticing requirements for this meeting?
Yes, Mayor.
And please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Present.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Krumiller?
Here.
Mr. Quinn?
Here.
Ms. Fraga?
Here.
Mr. Williamson?
Here.
Mayor Lemper?
Here. And now please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank everybody for their patience. This has been a long process, and it continued throughout this afternoon. And so as a result of that, we are going to be starting tonight's meeting with public comment, but then we're going to take a 30-minute recess just to make sure that the council members have the latest versions of all the documents we'll be voting on tonight. And also for all of you people with smartphones, all the things have been posted up on the municipal website, so it'll give everybody a chance. We're just going to take a pause for 30 minutes. Everybody will have the opportunity to read what's there before we come back. When we come back, we'll have the presentation, and we'll be voting on the resolutions in front of us tonight. Well, I said we had last minute. Yeah, there were some last minute negotiations that, this is a big puzzle, so you have to have everything, in all the pieces put together. But we are really excited and happy about our plan, and we're excited to share it with you in just a little bit. But first, I'd like to open up public comment for any items that are not on the agenda. And we'll start with the sign-up sheet. And Dan Rappaport, I'd like to call you up first.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I came to talk about the affordable housing issue. You may have read the article in the Trenton Times in mid-November that was called Keep Calm and Commune. It was talking about making housing even more affordable by creating apartments that people share, so like there are 4 people to an apartment, so the rent for each one is like a quarter of what it normally would be, so the people are pay 30% of their income in rent, and there's a income restriction. And the story was out of New Holland, Pennsylvania in Lancaster County. And I know that Princeton is an innovative town, and I think if something like this could take place on any of the sites that are proposed for affordable housing, given all the restrictions that are in place, I think this would be a marvelous way to proceed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Heather Howard?
Good evening, Heather Howard, Aiken Avenue, and I'm so glad to be back, to have the band back together. So many of us are here. And because this is Jenny and Tim's last council meeting, a few of us are here to express our appreciation for their service. Now, they are both so modest that they asked us not to come and requested no fanfare. But
There's still time to take your seat, Councilwoman.
But we would be remiss if we did not mark your tremendous service to Princeton. And so I have a few brief remarks. I had the good fortune of serving with both of you, and I consider you good friends and trusted colleagues. But more importantly, I think Princeton has not had two more devoted public servants. Jenny, I'll always be grateful for how you took me under your wing on the Borough Council when I was a new member, and I learned so much from you. You've been a tireless and good-humored advocate, I would say, for good government, transparency, and inclusion. You have that wonderful combination of a community organizer who has the innate instinct for what is right, always. And you've helped to guide our efforts to achieve the promise of consolidation. How many times did we say that? And you were a consistent voice for sustainability, good planning, and protecting the taxpayer. So it was an honor to serve with you. Now, Tim, you have served Princeton in many ways. First, you helped the families of Princeton when you were on the school board and helped to build and sustain our excellent schools. Then on council, you have volunteered for the most complex and sometimes thankless tasks and hardest assignments. Who here can forget that you out there spray painting the Beta bike lane and getting all of us out there with sweat equity to make that a reality? You have been committed to promoting equity, and your legacy will rebuilding the Civil Rights Commission is something you can be really proud of. You've been committed to promoting affordability and sustainability, and really you've embodied the values that Princetonians hold dear. And I should add, too, I noted Jenny's good nature. Also, your wit helped us through. So you both served Princeton with honor, dignity, and compassion, and those are really qualities that we could use more of in politics today. And so we at Princeton have been so fortunate to be served by you, and we will miss you.
Thank you.
And Lance Liverman, you're next.
Hello, how's everybody doing? You know, I just want to say, and this is the funny thing is, here Heather comes prepared, speech and all, and here I am non-prepared, but I just want to say ditto to everything Heather said, as I usually do. But Jenny was excellent. You know, Jenny was the council president. Jenny was someone that you could communicate with, you could talk to. She was always there, and Jenny was always caring. And I'll never forget that. And she's still an always caring person. Tim was always there, and Tim cares. Tim would ride his bike a little longer than me and go around the world in Anchor House and everything like that and impress me, but he always had a heart of gold. And I think that the town itself, we're losing two very special people. But the town is such a great town that the two individuals we have to take their place, I think that they'll do a fine job too. And so this isn't saying goodbye, it's saying see you later, but we just want to say thank you.
Joe Butler.
Hi, Joe Butler, 18 Hibbing Road. I want to echo the remarks of my former colleagues, Lance and Heather. I'm a little biased in my remarks in favor of Jenny simply because we served together. I had the pleasure of serving with Jenny in the former borough and for 2 terms in the consolidated municipality. And while Jenny's compassion, integrity, and grace under pressure are always on full display, I want to thank her for her efforts that aren't always recognized. Jenny has been a workhorse on council. When former council member Bernie Miller is here, Jenny and I volunteered to develop the first draft of the Harmonized Administrative Code and Ordinances. Jenny embraced this thankless task with enthusiasm, optimism, intellectual curiosity, and general good humor. We thought it would be a straightforward task. We would read both codes, we would pick the best one, and go from there. But early on, it became obvious that the borough's code suited the peculiarities of the town as did the townships, and both were quite old. So began the tedious task of harmonizing the ordinances on parades, solicitations, parking, hours of operation, noise, etc. And through it all, Jenny remained of good cheer. Public works, street calming, traffic and transportation, and even this affordable housing settlement are areas to which Jenny brought her considerable talents. Jenny on the dais never sought the spotlight. She happily toiled behind the scenes, working hard on the issues about which she cared a great deal. She is a champion of the underdog, of fairness and justice. I know her institutional knowledge and memory will be missed. I also want to comment on the Crummiller machine. The Jenny Crummiller machine. Jenny single-handedly did more to change the political landscape in Princeton than anyone I know. She opened the smoke-filled rooms and blew in some fresh air. She pushed for competitive elections, and she encouraged and supported new talent. Jenny opened the door of opportunity for so many others, whether they realize it or not, and it has been good for our town. Jenny has a dogged determination when she feels strongly about an issue. I've seen her quietly flip the entire council on an issue by calmly stating her position or opposition. Most of all, Jenny's been a clear moral force for good, even in turbulent times. The town is better for her service, and she will be missed. Tim, we didn't work together as long on council, just 1 year. But since you were my seatmate, I can speak to the fact that you were a quick and dedicated study, that you were always prepared and eager to learn. You took your committee assignments very seriously, and you've earned the reputation as a responsive elected official, both with the public and with the staff. Integrity is sometimes defined by what you do when no one is watching. In your case, many have been watching, and I personally want to acknowledge your commitment of time and energy through the end of your term. It hasn't gone unnoticed. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Tim. And with that, I yield my time.
And is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of public comment? All right, if not, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to council. And we also have some recognitions for Councilman Quinn and Council President Crummiller. So I'll start with Tim. We have a proclamation.
Oh, please read every word. Please don't.
All right, well, I'm going to hand this to you and not embarrass you too much, but I just personally want to thank you for being such a great colleague, for signing up for the difficult assignments. You've accomplished more in 3 years than a lot of people have in 3 terms, and have really had a hand in shaping some of the most important issues council has been working on, including the Neighborhood Task Force initiative, and biking, and what's happening with the fire department, and so many other difficult issues. So I want to thank you. You've been a pleasure to serve with, and we're really going to miss you. We're also going to be planting a tree in your honor when the ground is less frozen. And this is something.
Put mine next to Lance's tree, please.
All right, and then Jenny, we have a proclamation for you too, which, for the record, does contain a reference to the Crummiller machine. And I have to say, I'm one of the many people probably sitting up here who first got involved in politics because of your encouragement. So I personally want to thank you. You've been a great mentor and a great friend. Tim's been a great mentor and friend too. You've really helped to shape this town by example of what it means to be a dedicated public servant and to be a really great leader on council. So we're going to miss you. You have just an uncanny ability to just say things so clearly, and sometimes what other people are afraid to say, and you cut to the chase, and we're really going to miss that. So thank you, Jenny. It's been a pleasure to serve with you. We're also going to plant a tree for you.
Thank you. It really has been a privilege and an honor to serve the people of Princeton. I've greatly enjoyed working with Liz and my fellow council members, past and present. It's really fun to see everyone out here. And I'd also like to thank the excellent professionals and staff that we work with who have been really great. I'm really going to miss everyone. Thank you.
Okay, so I know there were some issues at the very beginning of the meeting with the documents, finding them online. They are up online now, so we are going to take a 30-minute recess to give everybody a chance. If you have your phone, you can log on to the Hotspot network. And if you don't have a phone, maybe sit next to somebody who does, and you can look over. This is not the way we wanted this to happen. We had plans to post everything on Monday, and there were a lot of moving pieces, and we wanted to make sure we took the time to get it right. So right now it's 10 of 8. We'll meet back here at 8:20 to resume the meeting. And is there a motion to recess for a half hour?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There's no password for the hotspot, but you have to welcome back. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. And I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction, and then we'll move on to the presentation. We'll get an explanation of how we got here today. We'll go through the plan, and then we'll take the resolutions one by one. So it has been a long process to get to this point, in part because the governing body was determined to develop a plan that not only met our affordable housing obligation number, but did it in a way that strengthened our overall community by contributing to other important goals as well, including increasing the amount of senior housing, affordable senior housing, providing housing opportunities for developmentally disabled adults, and maximizing the positive local economic impacts resulting from smart growth planning by building housing within easy walking distance and with transit access to shopping and jobs. Many of you attended the council meeting in May back in 2018 when a draft housing plan was discussed. The plan being presented tonight mirrors that plan in many ways, but with a few major changes. The 2018 plan included 2 proposed Princeton University developments. There were to be 90 affordable units built at the Butler track and another 60 affordable units constructed as part of a development on Lower Alexander. However, the university was unable to commit to building these units before 2025. So both of those projects needed to come out of the plan, and that meant we had to make up for a deficit of 150 units. We are accomplishing that with 3 main additions and changes to the 2018 plan. There are 64 affordable units slated to be built at the former Save Animal Shelter site in an 100% affordable development. We are increasing the size of the development slated at the shopping center and increasing the percentage of affordable units there. And finally, the new plan includes a development at Thanet Circle. There will be 2 developments on that site. The first will be an 100% affordable senior development, and the second will be an inclusionary development with 5 of the 3-bedroom units that are part of the inclusionary portion of that development set aside for developmentally disabled adults. In many substantive ways, we feel this plan is actually better than the plan that was unveiled in May of 2018. This plan produces more affordable units than the 2018 plan. We actually have a plan here for 777 unit credits, which is above our stated obligation of 753. And this positioned us well in case there are any objections when we present our plan to Judge Jacobson in February. The 2018 plan provided for 311 newly constructed affordable housing units, and tonight's plan provides for 345. At the same time, the 2018 plan called for 1,265 new units overall, and tonight's plan calls for only 742. So while the plan presented tonight has more affordable units than the May 2018 plan. It actually has fewer overall units, helping us to achieve a higher percentage of affordable units. Moreover, Princeton is well positioned for the next round of affordable housing, which is probably going to begin in 2026, which will be just a few years down the road. And we're well positioned for that because we anticipate that the university properties that were pulled out of this plan will be forming the backbone of the fourth round plan. So with that overview, I do want to thank all the professionals in front of here tonight, and we would not be sitting here with this plan if it weren't for all the hard work. And I want to thank Kevin Van Heist, our counsel, Joe Burgess, our affordable housing planner, and Shirley Bishop, our affordable housing consultant. You can tell people are trying to read through all the documents over the break. There's a lot of material here with a lot of detail. And a lot of moving parts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, Joe, and Shirley. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. To the audience, I do apologize for having my back to you.
You need to use the microphone there. Just speak right in it.
Oh, okay. Is that better? Okay, good. Thank you. Just for the benefit of the public, I'm sure everyone on council is aware, this is actually a process that started in the mid-'70s. With the Mount Laurel series of decisions from the Supreme Court that essentially affirmed that every municipality has an obligation. Closer? Oh, okay. Hey, I'm not used to being here. Usually I have the closed session, but every municipality in the state has an obligation to meet its fair share of affordable housing needs in the region. The early rounds, COA actually had 2 rounds that were successful, and municipalities and both Princeton Borough and Princeton Township at the time were able to meet their obligations. And what brings us actually here tonight is a process that started back in 1999 when COA changed their methodology and actually went into a different direction that resulted in years of litigation. And in 2015, the Supreme Court ultimately finding that the Council on Affordable Housing process, that was the state agency that was created to handle affordable housing obligations, was essentially non-functioning and returned the process to the courts. And at that time, the process moved from a land use process, for which you're all familiar, to a litigation process. And that has proven to be challenging because it removes a lot of the public input and a lot of the public discussion that you normally have in a master plan amendment and zoning amendments, and shifted it to a litigation process where you are working with internally to identify sites that may be suitable. You are working with developers that are approaching the municipality to see if they are able to actually produce units, and then trying to reconcile all of those things, and then even reaching out to other developers to see if there's an interest or not. That has also proven very, very challenging for a municipality like Princeton, because several municipalities, or even in Mercer County, can be more rural in nature, and they have more land that gives you more options. In a municipality such as Princeton, it has proven to be very, very challenging because so much of the municipality is already built out, and it's compounded by the merger, the consolidation of the borough and the township. As I started the remarks, both Princeton Borough and Princeton Township had fully met their round 2 obligations, but they did so in different ways. The township was actually, because it had more available land, had the ability to actually meet its obligation and actually exceeded its obligation by the actual production of units. The borough was significantly constrained by the inability to foster additional growth because essentially it was almost completely built out, and the sites that were able to develop were actually redevelopment. And I bring this up because part of the settlement that we're here to review tonight actually does address it. The borough was able to obtain what they call a vacant land adjustment, and that's a recognition by the courts and COA that they have the inability to meet its obligation or its quota because there isn't sufficient land available to develop to produce them. The settlement that we brought forward in 2018, or the plan that was talked about in 2018 last year, and the one that we bring forth tonight actually combines that. We are able to actually meet and make strides at closing that, what they call unmet need from the borough that came out of the second round, and we are able to do that, and Joe will actually, again, he's got some presentation, we'll have the specifics on it, but we are actually looking to adopt overlay amendments for certain corridors of the municipality in the former borough that, as sites redevelop, will give us the tool to capture affordable housing activities as they develop. Additionally, we are able to meet and actually, as the mayor indicated, exceed our third round obligation of 753. In 2017, as you'll recall, we did reach a tentative agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, and at that time we had agreed because there was uncertainty on how you were actually going to calculate obligations. And that's the one problem with the COA process when it failed. COA was actually the agency that calculated municipal obligations. When it went to the courts, there was uncertainty on how that would be calculated. And some of the complexities of that were the data sources that were used in the first two rounds weren't even in existence anymore. So many municipalities settled. We actually reached a tentative agreement, and we actually brought that forth to the public in 2017. And that agreement was for 888 units. Ultimately, we were not able to reach and conclude that settlement. And Princeton and West Windsor actually proceeded to the conclusion of the methodology trial in Trenton, where Judge Jacobson found that the municipal obligation was 753 units, a significant decrease on what Princeton had already begun its planning efforts for. So in 2018, we did present the plan. We've actually had significant conversations with Fair Share Housing Center since that time. And with council's instruction, we also set out to actually produce a plan that balances our needs for affordable housing units, and also try to encourage other things that are important to the community, like advancing the smart growth principles that the mayor was talking about, making sure that the sites were selected throughout the municipality and that they were adequately dispersed, and also accommodated the unit types that we need, that there is a demand for in Princeton. One of the other biggest challenges that we have is with the number of institutions that we have that do not react necessarily to market conditions. And that has actually resulted in the biggest changes of our plan since 2018. We had been in discussions with Princeton University, that certainly is the largest single landowner in the municipality. As anybody who has been reading the newspapers and is aware of the university, they are actually now focusing their efforts on their West Windsor campus, and that created a challenge that because this round expires in 2025, we did not have the ability to get the assurances that these projects would move forward between now and 2025. So that gave us the opportunity to kind of re-examine the municipality again and come up and as the mayor started talking about some of these substitute sites. So what we did was we actually pulled specifically Butler Tract out of the proposed plan, and also redevelopment potential that we saw along Alexander Road. We remain in conversations with the university, and at some point in the future, I'm sure they'll approach the municipality and we'll work together on those. But we have pulled those out, and what we've done is we've made up those units by several sites. So the first site, for instance, we were able to take a look and work with Princeton Community Housing for the development of the Princeton Community Village site. That is an existing site, and in the partnership on that, we will be seeing the new construction of 25 additional units out there. At Franklin Maple, that was in the plan last year for 80 units, but we have been working with Princeton Community Housing and also Princeton Housing Authority and we will actually be obtaining 80 credits out there. And in looking at bifurcating the site now, the Housing Authority will be able to, in the future, actually develop a portion of that site and maintain the Princeton preference, which is very important to them. We will still be able to foster the affordable housing opportunities and actually receive 80 credits for that rather than the 60 that we brought forth last year. One of the other projects that's in our plan that has actually already been through the approval process is 900 Herrontown Road. That is the former Saves site. That was I think it was in the spring, April or so, where they received approvals for that project, and they are actually now in and awaiting information from HMFA on their tax credit awards. So that was a great opportunity that we were able to include for 65 units on there. We will be receiving 64 affordable housing credits on that site. The Princeton Shopping Center site, we've also been in discussions with the property owner on there. Last year, we had them in the plan for 150 units that would have provided 30 affordable housing units. Last week, we're actually able to discuss with them a plan that will actually result in 200 total units on the site with a 22% set aside for 44 affordable housing units, which will enable us to put the density in an appropriate location with essentially walkable to the amenities that are right there and actually providing a greater than 20% set aside. The last project that we have put in the plan is 100 and 101 Thanet Road. And there are actually two components and actually two projects that will be enabled to come out of that site. As everyone is aware, there are two office buildings on that site that have essentially been vacant for over a decade now as the office market has shifted, and this will result actually in the redevelopment of that site. The first project will be a project for family market apartment units by Avalon Bay. And as part of the program on that, Avalon Bay will actually be and has agreed to subdivide off a little over a 2-acre parcel that will be dedicated to the municipality that we will be able to work with a redeveloper to develop an 80-unit an 80-unit senior affordable housing project on that site. So that's kind of the overview. I know Joe has a nice, he has visuals to go along with it rather than the just dry lawyer speak. So I'll turn it over to Joe and kind of give you a little more detail on those sites and the plan.
I thought you were going to do a written test after all that. That was quite impressive. Good evening, everyone. What my part of this presentation consists of is taking that May of 2018 plan and identifying where many of the components are being retained and where some of the components are being deleted and what is replacing those components. I also followed the format of the previous presentation, so those that were here back in May of 2018 might find some of these slides familiar, but for those newcomers, I think you'll find some of the information informative. So Kevin had touched upon some of the major court decisions that have occurred over the years. The most significant one is when we started this whole process in 1975 with Mount Laurel 1. That court decision by the New Jersey Supreme Court made the determination that every developing municipality in the state had an affordable housing obligation. And the beauty of the wording of that one paragraph out of a 276-page decision was that it gave the lawyers plenty of ammunition to fight over what a developing municipality was back then. And needless to say, for 8 years, municipalities were fighting over whether or not they were developing in comparison to other municipalities. And by 1983, the Supreme Court revisited the issue with what's referred to as Mount Laurel 2, and then they said every municipality has an obligation, and simply put, those in the growth area of the state plan would have a greater obligation than those municipalities who were in the non-growth area. And at that time, they also urged the state legislature to deal with this issue. And the state legislature did. They passed the Fair Housing Act, which was affirmed by the courts in 1986. And then the Council on Affordable Housing was created, and they began in 1987 to publish housing need numbers for every municipality. The next significant, important decision to cut to the chase was the decision that Kevin had touched upon, and that's the 2018 Jacobson decision, where actually I skipped one, where in 2015 the courts ruled that that COA has become dysfunctional. That's their term that they used in their decision. And that's when the courts took over the process from the Council on Affordable Housing. And fast forward to last year, when the Jacobson decision came down involving Princeton and West Windsor, where she made the determination about the methodology to be used moving forward. Now, for Princeton, the Jacobson decision identified a certain set of numbers, as did the Fair Share Housing Center in their arguments before the court. And you can see them presented in the graphic before you. The municipality's housing obligation, as is true of all municipalities, it consists of three components. There's a rehabilitation component, which for Princeton is 80 units. There's a prior round obligation covering 1987 through 1999 of 641 units. And in those two instances, you could see that fair share in the Jacobson court was fairly consistent with each other. And then there was the future obligation, or third round obligation, which covered the years from 1999 to 2025. And for that period alone, whereas Fair Share Housing Center made the determination that there was roughly a 1,500 unit obligation that Princeton had to address, the Jacobson court made the determination that that obligation was for 753 units. Now, there are many tools that the regulations provide that a municipality can avail themselves of. They are spelled out in the graphic before you, and Princeton in this new housing plan is taking advantage of many of these various tools for compliance. One of the questions that often comes up is, what are the income limits for an affordable household? There's a range of income limits based on family size. This graphic simply shows a 2-person through 5-person range. And if we focus on the 3-person obligation, you can see that for a moderate income household, you can have an income of a little over $74,000 and qualify for a moderate income unit. A low income household, a 3-person household, can have a $46,400 income, and a very low income 3-person household can have close to a $28,000 income. Now, the regulations do identify certain specific criteria in the site evaluation process. Basically, these are called the 4 ables in the battles of the court. You have to show that the site is available, approvable, developable, and suitable. And those terms oftentimes don't have the specific kind of meaning that one would have in general conversation. For it to be available, for example, it actually means that the site has clear title and is free of encumbrances. To be approvable, it has to be consistent with all the applicable agency rules. Even if the site is not currently zoned for affordable housing, that is one element that can be altered, obviously. To be a developable site, you have to have access to water and sewer infrastructure. And to be a suitable site, you have to be adjacent, excuse me, to compatible land uses with appropriate access. Excuse me. In addition to that, Princeton follows the state's smart growth principles in determining site selection, And there are 10 such principles spelled out by the state. They are identified here. I've specifically highlighted 4 that are very pertinent to this matter, whereby the smart growth principles include talking about creating housing opportunity and choice, encouraging walkable projects which will be in a walkable neighborhood that have a strong sense of place, that preserve critical environmental features, and encourage citizen and stakeholder participation. What I find particularly interesting about this process this evening is that Princeton does something that goes well beyond what most municipalities do. In most municipalities, the first time the public gets to see this plan is at the formal public hearing for the plan. Here we are holding, it is more in the form of an informational session to give the public the ability and the chance to make their own public input to this process. My firm represents 50 municipalities throughout the state at present. This is the only municipality that does it this way, so I applaud Princeton for this effort. So what I'd first like to do is talk about the components from the May of 2018 presentation. For the prior round obligation, the May of 18 presentation consisted of these 10 sites. None of these sites change. We are still using the same 10 sites to address our prior round obligation. When we talk about how we're going to address the third round obligation, we've broken this down into a series of different components. One is where there are existing and approved sites, approved but not yet built sites, you'll see later on, and newly proposed sites for consideration. The existing approved sites that were identified back in May of 2018 were shown on 2 slides because there were a total of 27 sites in that presentation. These first 13 sites remain in the plan unchanged. On this slide, we show the second 13 sites, some of which are being changed. The sites that are now highlighted are not being altered, but they are simply being shifted from one component of our approval process to the unmet need component of our process. So consequently, none of these sites are changing or being altered. They are just simply being shifted around from one component of the plan to another to meet the specific dictates and strategies of the COA regulations. Now, in addition to that, we have a number of new existing or approved sites. The Lytle Street site has simply been moved from the previously proposed side of the ledger to now an approved side of the ledger because this was approved some time ago for the Habitat for Humanity project of 2 affordable units. The Princeton Community Village project was an existing development which previously had no affordable units attached to it. We are now fortunate enough to get 25 units of affordable housing in that project. And as you heard from Kevin a little while ago, the 900 Herrontown Road project has now been approved back in the spring or early summer for a total of 64 affordable units. Now, there were a number of proposed sites separate from the existing and approved sites that were also proposed back in May of 2018. These are the 10 sites that are before you. Here, there are a number of changes that are being made. The 4 sites that are crossed out, the 5 sites that have been crossed out, are no longer part of the plan. As Kevin had explained, the Butler and the Lower Alexander site, for example, they're owned by the university. They made the determination that they just could not confirm that their projects would proceed in time to meet the 2025 deadline. We've also eliminated, as you can see, 3 other sites. The Lytle Street site obviously has been shifted from one side of the ledger to the other. It's still part of the plan, but in a different format. There is one, and I hate to admit this, there is one error on this slide on the S2 rezoning, where it's identified as E. We wrote that it was meeting now unmet need. That is not correct. Now, there are 2 new proposed sites to address the remaining portion of the third round obligation. One is the 80-unit senior housing project on Thanet Road, and the other is the Avalon Bay project on Thanet Road, which will have a total of 221 units, 21 of which will be affordable units. In addition, there's this issue of unmet need, and that's the difference between your obligation. This particularly relates to the borough issue, where the borough had a vacant land adjustment because they simply did not have sufficient vacant developable land that could meet the entirety of their obligation. So in that instance, the regulations provide that you must address at least a component, a portion of that unmet need obligation through a series of overlay zones. The map before you identifies the Nassau Street corridor, where we've identified 3 affordable housing overlay zones. The overlay number 1 and number 2 will permit at-grade retail with residential above, and a 3-story, 45-foot maximum configuration. The AH03 zone will be a 3-story building, but will be solely residential in development. So in summary, what we have in the 2018 plan, the 7 sites on the left-hand column are simply being moved to the unmet need component of our obligation, and 4 sites, the 4 sites in the middle column, are simply being eliminated from the plan entirely. And there are a number of sites being added now to the 2019 plan. They include the 3 sites, one on Herrontown Road, and the 2 on Thanet Road, and then the 3 overlay zones, which I had just mentioned. And as I think the mayor had said at the outset, by virtue of this plan, we end up with more affordable units than we had previously. But in the meantime, whereas previously the plan called for a total of 1,265 dwelling units, we now have a total of 742 units. And that, in essence, is the summary of the changes from 2018 to today.
Thanks.
And just to highlight that again, so even in net of the changes that we have made, this plan actually produces 20 additional affordable housing units over our plan last year at 520 less units overall. What you actually have before you as action items this evening are a series of documents that will enable us to actually move forward with that settlement. And I know it's there were lots of discussions going back and forth, as I had indicated at the outset. Part of this is a litigation process so that there are settlement agreements. This is not normally, and frankly, the municipal land use law actually does not give you the ability to actually do these types of settlements under general zoning, but because we're in the affordable housing realm, there were lots of discussions that were ongoing even late into this afternoon. There are essentially 4 action items on the agenda this evening. The first is a resolution authorizing the settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center. That agreement actually covers a lot of the components that we touched upon. It reaffirms the obligation that was set forth and found by Judge Jacobson, and then details how both the borough and the township met those obligations in the second round, and how the combined municipality of Princeton will be meeting its third round obligations, and essentially contains all of the plan overviews that we've highlighted this evening. The second document that will be in front, as you are aware and as you have received the planning board report from the planning board at last week's meeting, there is a recommendation from the planning board, having done a study of the 100-101 Thanet property that we have talked about in the plan. There's actually a resolution that will authorize and designate that site as a non-condemnation redevelopment area, and actually task the preparation of a redevelopment plan for that. The other two action items would actually are a memorandum of agreement with Avalon Bay that actually provides some of the details and the schedules for the proposed Avalon Bay project that will ultimately be set forth in the redevelopment plan. It provides for a pilot agreement that will enable us to move forward with the second or the last action item on tonight's agenda, and that is the 80-unit senior project. And so the last one is an affordable housing agreement with Pearl to actually construct that and also set forth the timing and the agreements for that.
Terrific. Thank you very much. It sounds like someone's alarm is going off. Oh, he did? Okay, excellent. I still hear it in my ears, so. Okay, excellent. So thank you, Joe, and thank you, Kevin. Did you want to add anything, Shirley, before we open it up? Okay. So at this juncture, I'd like to open it up for public comment. We'll hear from whoever wants to speak or have questions. After that, we'll close public comment. We'll bring it back to the council, and we'll consider the 4 resolutions in front of us tonight. So with that, I'd like to open up the microphone for anybody who'd like to speak. And I would just ask that you state your name and address, and if you can try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, that would be appreciated. So we'll start with Josh.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, Joshua Zinder. I live at 142 Moore Street. Can't hear you. Okay. Hello, Joshua Zinder. I live at 142 Moore Street. I'm also an architect here in town. First, I'd like to say that I applaud the effort to resolve this. I think our community definitely does need more affordable housing. I have a number of questions. First, when I look at the properties that were selected, and when I look at the overlays that are proposed in town, I'm curious why the maintenance lot on John Street was not considered or not included. And I'm also curious why the former Borough Hall office property was not included. Both of these sites are in downtown, walking distance, and would certainly meet all the smart growth principles that have been put forward far better than some of the other lots. Second question I have is, I find a number of the sites that are being looked at for affordable to be questionable at best with regard to the smart growth principles. Thanet, the Thanet site, Save site, those are convenient because there's a lot of property out there, but they're not walkable for seniors to town. And, you'd get very few seniors that would be walking downtown Princeton from there. Now, maybe they'd be walking to the shopping center, and I suppose that might be okay. Or maybe they'd be taking transit, but it seems like there are other properties that should be considered. At the old Borough Hall property, wouldn't it be wonderful to have senior housing right there where everyone could just walk right downtown? I am curious how this is going to be voted on this evening. It seems like there's been incredibly short notice put forward on this, and I understand there might be timing issues and a rush to get it done before the end of the year maybe, but it seems like things like the overlays that are being proposed, you know, there are property owners that are in those overlays and they haven't even seen them. They don't even know they're being included. And I think that it's short-sighted to be voting on this evening without at least giving them a week or two to review this information. So my recommendation is that you count this as an introduction tonight and then vote on it in a week or two. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think maybe we'll have a few comments and then we'll do we'll do a set of questions and then we'll hear from more folks just to keep it organized.
I'd like to second a few things that Josh said. My name is Joel Schwartz, S-C-H-W-A-R-T-Z. I'd like to second a few things that Josh said. I was not able to understand very much about the plan, the 115 pages reading it on my iPhone. So I'm pretty perplexed as to exactly what is going to be decided tonight and what are the consequences of those decisions. Since effectively everyone who's not on the dais has no idea what's in the plan. So if you're making decisions that are binding on our town, I stand here effectively feeling disenfranchised. I could glance at the only thing that's comprehensible on my iPhone is some of the drawings of the Avalon site. I can tell that there's 301 units there, of which 103 are going to be affordable approximately, so there's a 33% set aside. I'm not in a position to evaluate if 80 senior units plus 20 of some other kind of affordable units that I cannot possibly ascertain is a good mix. At a glance, it looks to me that the 200 Avalon units will generate an awful lot of school kids. I recognize that the 80 senior units will not generate any school kids, but it's, as an example, it's impossible to tell what exactly you're going to be doing tonight. So I'd appreciate, after we get done with the questions, if you could explain what decisions are going to be made, to what extent there's the opportunity to revisit anything that you decide tonight, because no one in this room is in a position to offer anything in the form of meaningful comments about what's in the plan. Thanks.
All right, why don't we take a pause right there and we can address some of the issues that were raised. So wrote down 3 main questions. So one is how were properties selected and why were there some municipal properties that were not part of this plan? Second is, have the property owners that are listed in this plan been notified? And if you can explain again what is in front of council tonight and what we'll be voting on.
I can take the timing issue because we're in litigation, and then I'll turn it over to our planning consultants to address the actual sites themselves. But as we started out, this is a litigation process, and that's actually what has driven the totality of the schedule, including tonight's rollout of this as late as 5:30 this afternoon when we were still working to finalize that. There is not the leeway to defer because there are already court hearings that are set up, and the court has already been notified that we intended to move forward with approval of the settlement agreement this evening. And while, frankly, we've had lots and lots of discussions over the last 4 years as we were going through this process, we simply, because of the confidential nature of the litigation, we're not actually able to go out to the public and contact all of the property owners that are in the site. As to the specific overlay property owners, it is an overlay ordinance that is proposed, and so it is not affecting any of their existing rights. What it is actually doing is broadening their rights by giving them different development opportunities. At some point they will be contacted, but this plan actually does not impact any of their existing rights and does not take anything away. As to the why specific sites were included or not included, and certainly Michael, Joe, Shirley.
I can tell you that over the last several years that every possible site that could be available for affordable housing was visited. There was also a committee that had put together a comprehensive plan of possible sites for affordable housing. And then looking at all of the possible sites and specifically looking to see which of the sites could develop by 2025, which was absolutely critical, sites were eliminated. And the sites that are in the plan now are considered realistic sites that can be developed for affordable housing within the constraints of the court and the court settlement agreement. I have to say, as a planning consultant, this has been a very difficult process for all municipalities in New Jersey that have participated in the process and filed a declaratory judgment action. Because you are in a settlement agreement and in mediation, everything was confidential. This could not be shared with the public. And the concerns that the citizens here have are the concerns that were expressed by every other municipality and the citizens at public hearings. But this is the way the court has set this up, and we do have to abide by the court's process.
I also just want to respond to that because I feel like much of this has been out in the public domain for over a year. And we fought with our counsel and we actually pushed the envelope on several occasions. So we released essentially a version of this plan, much of which mirrors what we're going to be voting on tonight. And it's been out since May of 2018. When we started talking with Avalon Bay about the Thanet properties, we announced that publicly so the public would be aware that that site was being talked about. And that did cause some consternation because we also want to be respectful of the court process. We want to be respectful of the judge that we're going to be standing in front of. And we want to be respectful of the partners that are going to be helping us to construct this housing and to do it in a way that makes our community a better place. So we've been trying to walk a fine line, but I will say at every opportunity, we've been pushing and crossing the line on occasions to put stuff out in the public. We had public meetings, I think it was probably 3 years ago, where we talked about the concepts and we talked about the different properties. And so I do have to push back against the idea that everybody's seeing this for the first time. There's a small portion of this people are seeing for the very first time, but a lot of the pieces you're seeing for the very first time have been talked about for the past several months. Can you go back and talk about what we're voting on tonight and what that will bind council to? And if you can just even talk about what the timeline is from tonight's vote into the next, say, several 6 months, because I also want to make it clear to folks that this is, even though in some ways it's the end of a process, we have a settlement if we approve it tonight. It's in a lot of ways the start of a new phase of this process.
Exactly. So so the first resolution that's on this evening is actually the resolution that approves the Fair Share Housing Settlement Agreement. Fair Share Housing Center is recognized by the court as essentially one of the key litigators and the key advocates for ensuring that the low and moderate income family needs in the state are met. So they actually, all of the settlements essentially go through them. That is the first thing that gets approved, and that is, as I indicated earlier, actually sets out our intended plan. The next stage of this process in the court process is that on February 7th, Judge Jacobson has scheduled a hearing, presuming that this is approved tonight, where the court will evaluate whether or not the settlement is fair and equitable and essentially protects and provides those opportunities for the low and moderate income families and individuals that the court is concerned about, and will evaluate that plan. There is a special master that is appointed by the court that will actually review the plan in the upcoming month and provide a report to the court. Simultaneous while that process is working, because we are so far on, as I said, that this current process actually started in 1999. The third round started in 1999. It concludes in 2025. So we are actually It essentially, the round has been essentially 2.5 rounds of the COA process, and we are actually forced to complete that round by 2025. Luckily, as Joe's slide made clear, Princeton was actually ahead of the process because so many of the units had been constructed and you had opportunities and took advantage of those opportunities even while the courts were arguing about the entire process. But it is a very short time frame actually to effectuate our plan. So the second and third agreements that are on tonight, or the third and fourth resolutions, will actually calls for the redevelopment plan to be constructed for the site. So we will be proceeding with a redevelopment plan, and the public will have input on those as that comes through. That needs to be done by ordinance. So both at council meetings and also at the planning board, there will be opportunities for input and comment on those plans. After the adoption of those plans, there will be agreements that need to be done under the redevelopment law and following the redevelopment process. And then those site plan applications will follow shortly. We anticipate that the site plan applications for both Thanet projects will be here as early as late spring or early summer. Additionally, following the court's hearing, we will also be moving forward with the other obligations that are set forth in the settlement agreement. The planning board will be working on the housing element and fair share plan. Essentially, that is an amendment to the master plan. And then there are several ordinances. Joe touched upon some of the overlay ordinances. There is also the master affordable housing ordinance that sets forth the development fees, how affordable housing units are phased, bedroom distribution requirements. That ordinance will be prepared. That is all essentially prescribed by COA rules, but we will need to adopt that ordinance. And then we will need to adopt the other ordinances for the other projects. So that's essentially the process, and we anticipate that will take us essentially through the summertime, and then we would return to court after we complete all of those ordinances at what they call a compliance hearing, and that's where the court will evaluate all of our submissions and ensure that we are compliant both with the settlement agreement and Her Honor's order.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Well, if you've already spoken, I'd ask you to wait and let's hear from everybody else first. And if you can, we'll see if we have time for a second round.
Is this the time for questions as well as comments, or?
Yeah, that's fine too. You state your name first.
My name's Carl Peters. I'm a professional engineer and planner. I had a question with regard to the affordable housing overlay zones that were in the report. I heard from Mr. Van Hise that some Princeton University sites were taken out of the plan because there was reason to believe that they wouldn't be developed within the time frame, I think it was 2025. Now, it was hard for me to see on my phone again those sites that you had along Nassau Street, but I think one of them was, there's a bank site there by Scott Lane, and one looked like it was the Jewish Center property. And I wondered, there's reason to believe that those sites will be developed and will get that housing within the time frame?
The overlay zone for unmet need does not have a timeline in place. That it's not required by 2025, but that zone remains in place.
But there are some other sites that are not included in an overlay zone, such as maybe the Textile Research Institute site, because that would mean if that was developed in this time frame, there would be no affordable housing requirement there. Is that correct?
That is not correct. One of the aspects of the settlement with Fair Share is that the overlay requirement for affordable housing with any residential development throughout the entire municipality is going to be put in place. So anywhere in town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I'd like to compliment Council for giving consideration to smart growth in identifying these sites. And I'd like to call your attention to an aspect of smart growth that needs further consideration. And that is recreation facilities for the young people that will be living in the market rate in affordable units, and transportation for the senior residents in the senior facility. The senior facility is not a direct walk to Princeton Shopping Center. There's no direct path from that location to the Princeton Shopping Center. You get there either by walking out to Terhune and up to Harrison and down Harrison to the entrance to the shopping center at the bank, or down Grover and through the park. Neither is a direct route, and there are some people that beat a path through the now vacant lot on the corner of Harrison and Terhune, but my guess is that vacant lot is probably part of the plan as well, and there won't be a direct path there. So I ask that before we lock this down in terms of an affordable housing plan, we recognize that young people without a recreation facility are young people who are unhappy and have spare time that is not always put to good use on their hands, and that elderly people without appropriate transportation to the shopping center, at least, or to a senior resource center, are young people, are older people who are held in isolation, and it does not truly meet smart growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. And can one of our professionals address the part of this process where those discussions would be had in terms of putting in walking paths, transit stops, etc.?
Many of the 100% senior developments do have the developer provide transportation. Okay, can you hear me now? Most of the 100% affordable senior developments do have some form of transportation that is negotiated with the owner-developer of the particular site. And all of the amenities and the necessities that were raised tonight will be addressed when the process moves forward. I think a complete list will be put together, but transportation has always been very critical for any of the senior developments.
In addition to that, there is discussion with Eden Properties, who owns Princeton Shopping Center, to enhance transportation alternatives and provide walking paths to provide linkages to various community facilities in the community.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Michael Floyd, Harris Road. I want to thank you, those of you that worked on this, for all your hard work on this. And yeah, I really appreciate all the hard work that those that worked on it did. I know I needed to thank you for fighting with Fair Share and the Builders Association, because they gave you a tough battle. And I believe they leaned on Princeton harder than they leaned on some other towns. And actually, I know they did. I won't tell you how I know it. And I too have a little bit of problem with the process, and yes, there has been draft proposals, possible sites, but now is a time, I think, when some people believe they should be able to comment and consider more. But the process is the process at this point, and we'll see how it goes forth. But for instance, on the 3rd of December, I and a number of other people, maybe about 8, got invited by Princeton Community Housing to look at a very rough site plan for Franklin Maple parking lot. And we didn't get too far into it before we were trying to comment, and they said, well, the 80-unit number is locked in. I said, well, what is the community commenting on then if it's non-negotiable? And I said, well, the town told us we got to do 80. I think at that, so we gave a few comments, but it didn't get that far. Speaking of that particular site, I guess it sounds like the plan was 60 units about a year ago in 2018. Now it's 80 units on that site. And also now it's 22% smaller because the housing authority took part of the land than it was when it was 60 units. So it seems this site, which is a block up the street from where I live, has been intensified, and I think unduly intensified. One of the reasons given by people at the meeting was, well, we really need 80 units to make the tax credit financial projections worth. I looked at the consultant, who I happen to know. I said, has anybody run numbers? Yes. Sounds like someone that was at the meeting, too. And the consultant said, no, I can run feasibility numbers at a lower number of units. You know, I said, well, why don't you try 70 or whatever? But then I thought about this, and I think some of you have heard and some have repeated this concept that tax credit feasibility is based on an 80-unit pro forma. I finally went around. I knew that wasn't really true. So I went and got the information of the applications pending at HMFA this round, and there's 25 of them. 17 of them are less than 80 units. 12 of them are less than 66 units. Some as low as 44, 38. So this sort of explanation that we need 80 units to hit feasibility for tax credits, and I think many of you have heard it, it's just not true. So I would like you to look particularly at the Franklin Maple, where you've upped the number to 80, and the site itself for the 80 has gone down 22% in square footage.
Joel Schwartz, Armour Road. When we started the questions, Josh and I asked some questions. Kevin was very clear about answering them, but I don't think our questions were answered. What we're really asking was, I'll be specific. With regard to the two Thanet sites, there are memorandums of understanding in those 115 pages, and there are plans attached to those memorandums, and from what I can read on my iPhone, there are specific numbers of units. My question was, when you approve this tonight, to what extent are you locking in what I could barely decipher on my iPhone? Are you locking in, for example, the exact numbers of plans or in a particular configuration? Because when I read the words memorandum of agreement and I see plans attached to them, it suggests that you are agreeing to a lot of specific stuff in those plans, which I've never seen. Similarly, I could not decipher anything about the shopping center, except that there's 200 units proposed total, of which 40 I think are affordable. I didn't see anything specific about that. So my questions are, to repeat, what exactly are you agreeing to with regard to the two Thanet sites, and what are you agreeing to and locking in with regard to the shopping center?
Okay, yeah, I appreciate you asking that again and getting clarity, and I'll have Kevin answer that.
The agreement for the Thanet site, actually, they're still conceptual plans, and they are still being worked out. There is a lot of, obviously, engineering and site work that go into. The unit count is agreed to, and the overall essential structure of that is agreed to. So there are still a lot of design elements that are open, but yes, we are actually entering into an agreement for them to do a development plan. There will be 210 units out there. There is an affordable housing component that is agreed to, and that is actually established by the agreement, both with Avalon Bay and also with Fair Share in the Fair Share agreement. And just as a correction so everybody understands, there's actually 21 credits that are being developed on the Avalon Bay site. They are actually going to be coming from 6 family apartment units, family affordable housing units on the site, and 5 additional units will be set aside as 3-bedroom homes for individuals with special needs that enable us to actually get credit per bedroom on those. So it's not 21 actual units, it's 21 credits in 11 units on there, and that is established by the both agreements.
And can you speak to what legal meaning the drawings have in the appendix?
They are essentially concept plans. I mean, they're out there. They are looking at the feasibility of 2 different design elements, and that's why they are included in there. The development, as currently discussed, will consist of essentially flats in the back of the site, and then they're looking at some townhouse units at the front of the site, and then whether or not they will be out on the Terhune Road frontage or down along Thanet is something that will be worked out through the as their engineers and architects are able to evaluate the site and work with our professionals during the redevelopment plan process.
And can you also give some clarity about the Franklin site? So on the original plan, it was slated for 80 units, but we were only getting 60 credits.
So
now there's 80 units with 80 credits. Can you explain the change there?
Correct. The Franklin Maple site, as we've designated in there, actually is comprised of 3 lots. Last year when it was proposed, we were working with the parties on that, and we're proposing actually an 80-unit project on the site. 20 of those units were going to be set aside for the Princeton preference, which means they had a preference for Princeton residents. That presents funding challenges and also is not creditable under COA's rules, because COA rules require you to provide your quote unquote the fair share of the regional need. You are not entitled to have local preferences in order to count for credit. In discussions with PCH and the authority earlier this year, we came upon an opportunity that will allow that site to be actually developed. We will continue to maintain the 80 units. Part of those we need for our plan. They were long-term discussions that have been going on for quite some time now. Again, the Franklin Maple site was in the prior iterations of our plan, but we are actually now able to do that. And the way that will be done is actually the front lot out towards Witherspoon Street. The smaller lot will actually be set aside, and the Housing Authority is working on plans to develop that at some time in the future and will enable them to maintain the Princeton preference should they choose to do so. The additional 80 units that we need for crediting and as part of our settlement agreement and our plan will actually are able to be fit, and that's why the PCH has already started having some of those meetings that were referenced. They can accommodate the 80 units on that site, and because those units will not have the Princeton preference, we are actually able to take credit for all 80 units. And the last question Mr. Schwartz raised was on the shopping center. We are not at the position to have, other than essentially a confirmation agreement going back and forth. We are in the process and will be working forward in the upcoming month. I would anticipate at one of the January meetings, we will have something similar, either an MOU or an agreement with the shopping center on that, but that was one of the components of the plan that were being discussed right up until the late hours, and so we were not able to have an agreement prepared for council's consideration or approval this evening.
Okay. Let's hear from people who haven't spoken yet. Come on, Dina, and then, well, let's let someone use, and then you can come up and speak after.
Hi, Dina Shaw, 185 Clover Lane. When the schools, my question is about the schools, and has there been coordination with the school board these seem like a lot of places for people to live, which is wonderful, but the schools are already quite full, and we are still working through a $26 million referendum that the town approved. I believe there's another request coming for the town and the taxpayers. So I don't know if there's a way, based on what happened at Avalon Bay and Copperwood and elsewhere, to extrapolate the potential number of students. Because 200 units at the shopping center, that's a lot of potential children at what's zoned as Littlebrook, I believe. So I don't know what the coordination has been and the consideration.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we have been talking with the school district, and one of the new policies we've adopted is when developers come before the planning board, they present some sort of pro forma of what they anticipate the school impact is going to be, so we can share, the planning board can share that information with the schools. It's not used to vote an application up or down, but it's just information that's helpful for the schools so they know for their planning. And that's a request that came from the district that would help with their planning, that that we're able to help them with.
And do we have I mean, we're talking about a short time period of 5 years. Do we have an idea based on so far?
It totally depends development by development. I'm sorry, I should let. No, it's not, but the information is not to have the planning board use it to determine whether to approve something or not, but it's information. It's same when we ask for traffic information or other things. It helps just with planning.
And I realize that we have to abide by decisions that are out of our control. At the same time, we have schools that are busting at the seams, that are facing lots of issues, and it might be helpful as they make their plans in the next few years to know, are we adding 200 kids or 500 kids?
If I can just jump in for a minute, you know, the school's demographer now will have the information they need to be able to project the number of school kids, because they know, you know, how many total family units are being built, both affordable and market rate. They know how many senior units are part of the plan, and so on and so forth. So given the information that's being made public tonight, the demographers should be able to come up with a very reliable projection of how many school kids will result. And, you know, the schools are really happy with the current plan, because compared to a year ago, as the mayor and Kevin both mentioned during their summaries, we have a lot fewer total housing units than were in the plan a year ago.
And just one last question. I know when Copperwood was built, it was supposed to be 55 and older, and the only reason I know anything was at a point when the schools were surprised by the number of kids that lived in Copperwood and all of a sudden showed up at the doorsteps of our schools. So do we have any protection of that happening again?
Yes, so maybe we can have Kevin answer this. So when Copperwood was built, it was built as a senior development, but then the rules changed. There was a window, and if somebody can just explain what happened.
They took advantage of the conversion law because the market was so saturated, and with the economic collapse, it allowed developers to actually, that were approved for senior projects under certain constraints, to be able to convert those to market. The senior units that are proposed here, specifically on Thanet, will not go through the conversion process. There's actually an approval process, and they are being approved for senior units. So we don't actually have to worry about the conversion law on that.
Good evening. My name is Mike Pissarro. I'm the Policy Director for the Watershed Institute. I want to thank you for this opportunity.
To speak right in the mic.
Even better. First, you know, the council and the professionals were placed in a very difficult position. And I do appreciate all the efforts you've made over the last year or so to sort of unveil what you could. It's an unfortunate position that most towns have been in, and many of the towns that I've been in that have done this process, there has been consternation. It is a difficult process. But with that being said, I do have a few questions or concerns. I'll start with the Thanet properties. That is an area that is upstream of developments, as you well know, that has experienced significant flooding. So if you're going to do redevelopment, I would urge you to use that redevelopment process to really provide good stormwater management, good flood control. Take advantage of that process, which gives you greater powers than that you would normally have to try to alleviate problems, both existing and what this development may bring. So that, in a word of caution, I know there are concept plans. I was involved in dealing with a project from the affordable housing that went through a concept plan, and every time the planning board pushed back on an issue, the developer waived the concept plan while your town approved it. You can't tell me no. You can't argue with me. It's been approved. Whether that was right or wrong, that developer did use that concept plan somewhat as a sledgehammer. So if you could at all tweak that agreement to clarify that those things are not binding on the planning board in this town, I would suggest you do that. And then with the overlay zones, those overlays, if I understand correctly, I was trying to go from this document and your zoning codes, and it was a little bit difficult, but you are doubling, if not tripling, the amount of impervious cover allowed in those overlay zones. So I sort of have a question of whether the actual overlay zone properties already have that impervious cover and you're just merely allowing what already exists, or you are in fact going above the zoning code and doubling and tripling it, because obviously there is a significant concern if you do that. If you have 90% impervious cover, there's very little area to provide for any stormwater management going forwards. And obviously going forward, you will want to have stormwater management, again, to help alleviate flooding downstream. So that was sort of a question and a concern. I appreciate your time, and thank you.
Thank you. I guess a couple follow-up questions from that comment. First of all, do we have a sense of the existing impervious cover situation in those overlay zones?
In many instances, the current impervious coverage is greater than 80%. I believe our proposed ordinance is 80 or 90% in some instances.
Speak directly into the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe the current conditions are roughly 80% coverage. The proposed ordinance provides, I believe 80 to 90% in some instances.
Okay, and then the other question was having the concept plans in the agreement, in particular the sketches of the proposed Thanet development by Avalon Bay. Do we need extra language for our planning board so they're not bound to something that we haven't scrutinized to the point of saying this is what we want this configuration exactly to be approved?
Yes and no, typical lawyer answer. The planning board, as everyone knows, is a separate body with separate jurisdictions, so we don't have the ability to specifically direct them. However, we're utilizing the redevelopment process through this, so we will actually be able to work with the developer, and have already started doing that. So Avalon Bay has already got their team that are working on it. They're starting to share the information as they're learning things about the site. They're sharing it with us, and we'll be able to craft the redevelopment plan that meets their needs and also achieves the goals that we're looking to do. That will then be codified in the redevelopment plan, and so long as the development is consistent with that, then yes, then the planning board needs to act within its constraints to make sure and verify that what is being proposed actually meets with the ordinance. So unlike just a normal zoning or something like that, actually here utilizing the redevelopment process and with the relationship that we have with Avalon Bay and actually Pearl on the other parcel will actually enable us to actually take those concept plans and actually build a redevelopment plan around that.
I was just going to suggest, because even with a non-affordable project, once something gets to the planning board, they can make, conditions of approval, but it's hard, to really reconfigure the site. I think that it might be helpful to have like a special meeting of SPRAM or something as we're developing the redevelopment plan, because that's really the time to have the input as the redevelopment plan is being created and not at the time that it's coming to the planning board. Obviously, there are things that are appropriate to deal with at the planning board, but I think that might be helpful.
Right, and, yeah, Mr. Burtis.
On the impervious coverage issue, my comments were correct for the AHO 1 and 2 zones. The AHO 3 zone, the proposed impervious coverage is 70%.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Yeah, Michael?
Just a follow-up on the Franklin parking lot, Maple. The obvious is, as you know, the 80 units you want to do, and now that it doesn't include the housing authority, we're talking 100 large family units on that site as the ultimate end game. And that's a lot of units. And since he did mention the parking lots, the draft concept, there's a C of macadam, because the more units, you got to produce more parking spots. And it's like 100 and I think it was 38. And imagine on that, not that great site, but really 100 units of large units. And I did mention at the meeting with PCH, I'm sure the town has sort of extra units, as you've mentioned. You have a little surplus. And if any of council wants to vote to lower the number on Franklin, you could do it and substitute in, which is what I thought you could do when we were talking to PCH.
Hendricks Davis, John Street. First, someone lost a nice hat here. It was on the floor over there. Cashmere. Okay. Goes right here. I guess the question I have is probably answerable. And again, I haven't had an opportunity to read this very closely, and with my poor vision, just had a cataract taken out on a week ago Monday. It's hard to see, but am I reading this correctly that that all of the units that are being proposed are rental units? So there are no units that are being proposed for development for sale to low and moderate income.
Habitat for Humanity.
Two. Woo-hoo! That's fantastic. But I think that there's an opportunity that perhaps is being missed here, and perhaps a responsibility that is being overlooked by the council to actually not only do planning based on smart growth principles, but planning that is based on equitable growth principles. What we're basically doing here, which I think is great, we all know that we need more affordable housing, but some of us know that there's a need for more housing that is truly affordable and that can be purchased by low and moderate income families. And so if none of these projects, except for one, which is going to produce 2 units of housing that will be sold to low or moderate income families, what you're basically creating is a static situation that will not allow for equitable growth in this community. You're creating basically the golden ghetto that we've said that we don't want by not planning, finding a partner, whether it's Habitat for Humanity or some other partner that can actually build significant number of houses for sale to low and moderate income people. So I lay that as a charge and a responsibility to the council, because you know that many people in this community have been disadvantaged through redlining and other quasi-governmental processes out of the housing market to buy a home. And that perpetuates inequality. You know that. You know that it is better for people to own a home where they're building equity than it is for them to rent a home. Yes, we do need all of these rental properties, but I think also we need a process that will bring more equity into the for sale market here in Princeton. So if it's not going to happen in this round, I hope that the council members who will be here in 2025 will be thinking about that and will be looking for partners in the affordable housing construction for sale market or industry that they can partner with, that you can partner with. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll close public comment then, and we'll bring it back to council. And I wanted to see if any of my colleagues had any comments. Yeah, Mr. Cohen, did you want to start?
Yeah, I had a couple of responses to several of the different members of the public. First of all, I wanted to respond to Josh's 2 suggestions of the publicly owned properties at Borough Hall and the John Street Public Works Yard. And I think one of the things that to me would have ruled out the Borough Hall property is that anything that's in the former borough is going to unmet need. So that's true of these overlay, the AHO 1, 2, and 3 zones. We don't actually get to count any units that get built there towards our 3rd round obligation, and I would be concerned that the same thing would have been true if we had offered the Monument Hall property. So it wouldn't be a solution for this. And in terms of the Public Works Yard, you know, that's an absolutely critical, it's a very heavily used piece of property, and it's in the right place from a standpoint of resiliency with climate change. We want it to be close to emergency services like the police department and PFARs. And you know, we've created a real central municipal complex, and that's really part of that municipal complex and providing vital services at certain times. So I just wanted to respond to those two ideas that were thrown out. I wanted to thank Michael for his comments about the Franklin property, and I don't want to be in a position of actually, voting to change the agreement, but I do think that it's something that you can continue to talk with PCH, with the developer about, because if they can do a project that has 70 units, you're right, we do have some extra units in the plan right now. So without having further conversations with them, I don't want to sort of overrule their sense that 80 is the right size for their funding, but it's, keep pushing. and
Sorry, I'm going to
it shouldn't
let
be
David
back and
continue.
forth. And then I also wanted to thank Hendricks because my understanding throughout this process has been that we don't get as much credit for ownership units, but I've never really asked Shirley the question of we only get a maximum number of credits, multiplied credits for rental units, and
Credits up to 25%.
right. So I guess, are we close to the cutoff? In other words, could some of our units have been ownership units and we could have still gotten the maximum number of bonus credits?
We do have more. We've noticed with the for sale developer that they will cut off a portion of the for sale site and offer that to a developer to build rental housing. Very rarely today do you see inclusionary for sale housing, because the market is actually, for the low moderate households, is to really the rental markets and also the financing markets.
Okay. So basically we're saying that people are really wanting the rental units
Yes.
more than ownership units.
I mean, home ownership used to be the American dream, but the population today wants mobility, quite frankly, more so than a permanent residence. It's changing.
I would say that, did you want to respond to that first? I was going to say, I think people want to own, but the way you have to think about, it's almost like a Venn diagram of who qualifies for affordable housing and who qualifies for a loan and financing. And because of what's happening right now, there is so little overlap. So Princeton does have quite a few for sale developments that are managed by our Affordable Housing Board. And I would say we rarely go a council meeting without one of those properties being on our agenda, because the town ends up buying them when there's not a owner-to-owner sale, because the market is so messed up right now. And we don't want them going up and just becoming regular market rate. So actually the town we have a fund that we're supporting, keeping those as affordable owner units. But to add more just really doesn't make sense when we can barely get people into the ones that we have. But I would say it's great. It's a great opportunity for people who do fit right in that category, and it's a real shame that so many of them are not being bought by people who might qualify. So there's a lot of great opportunities. Actually, affordable housing unit in Palmer Square, that's for rent. That would be a wonderful place for a lot of people to live if you qualify for it. And if you have any questions about potentially qualifying, go talk to Kate Warren, who's sitting on the aisle there, because our Affordable Housing Board has been trying to see if we can get that rented. So
it's been on the market for quite a while.
Right. So there's opportunities there, but the for sale market is one where we have a real excess of units right now, unfortunately.
And I think it's the general population, not just the lower income population, that renting is a lot more young people are renting and choosing not to own homes because the economics don't always add up. It's not a no-brainer that you end up better off owning. I know my own daughter is renting and isn't buying a house.
Did anybody else want to make a comment? Ms. Niedergang?
I really appreciate, I have a prepared statement that I want to express elements of that, but I don't want to be in a position where ignoring the comments. So I wanted to state my appreciation for the really thoughtful comments, and I know this is an extraordinarily difficult situation to have so much information dumped on both us and the residents of the town with really not very much time to process it in order to make decisions. And I want to keep us focused on some of the elements that residents and council can have an impact on moving forward. Like the numbers, I mean, I won't argue with David about whether or not the numbers on Franklin can be tweaked a bit, but on the whole, I would say the numbers are firm. That's not something where we have a lot of leeway, nor are the actual sites that are identified. But how a development on Franklin is moves forward, what it looks like, how the Thanet development comes to fruition, what it looks like, what aspects it has. Those are the things that residents, the planning board, SPRAB, other committees and council will have impact on and input into. So for everyone, this is a kind of, you know, something that comes from on high and descends on us. And I hope that we don't end up spending a lot of time arguing about the things that we can't change and can focus instead on the many things that we can change and affect. So I just have a few things I want to read from my prepared statement. Although I was not on council when this round of negotiations began, I'm really happy to be here for the conclusion. I support the agreement we are presenting today, not because it is perfect, but because I truly believe that it is the best result that this mayor and council, this negotiating team, and this municipality could achieve under the specific circumstances facing us in late 2019. Reaching this agreement has been a very contentious process with disagreements among members of council, between the municipality and Fair Share Housing, and between the municipality and some of the developers who will be working on the projects. Compounding the difficulty of the situation, and this has already been touched on advice of council, we have kept these negotiations confidential. And again, that many aspects of this plan are not subject to change, but there are many aspects that are, and I hope that we can focus on that. I also want to just pay some tribute to my colleagues, because everyone here and our staff and all the members of our affordable housing team have approached this with the utmost seriousness, with the utmost desire to do good. To create an effective affordable housing plan to really allow for this community to be diverse in not only in ethnically, in various other ways, but also economically. It's been a real commitment here, and I know that you don't have that in every town where every single member of the governing body is forcefully pro-affordable housing and sees it, I think I speak for everyone, as not only our legal obligation, but our moral obligation. We are all really committed to this. Some people, I know there's going to be a lot of second guessing about this, and so I want to just speak for a moment about the process of change. The status quo and a static situation is never going to remain. Change is inevitable, and all we can do is try to shape it. And I think that we've done the best we can to shape it for the better. I know some people want the town to stay as it is or to move in different directions. And I think, this is obviously subject to debate, but I think, we're never going to have a situation where things stay exactly as they are. And whether another negotiating team or under different circumstances, we could have reached a different agreement that maybe would recognize some of the issues that have been brought before us. I mean, that's possible. I think we're dealing with a lot of constraints, and I think everyone really worked hard to do the best that we could under the circumstances. And again, I think I speak for everybody that it's been a frustrating process, and I would ask that all of you, as members of citizens of the state of New Jersey, lobby our representatives to get a functional co-op process or something other than a court-ordered process back, so that our next round of affordable housing is not done in this way, is not done behind closed doors under legal orders. So thank you for listening.
Ms. Fraga, and then Mr. Quinn, do you want?
Okay. Well, very well put. I want to echo what my colleague, Councilwoman Niedergang, just stated. It was just very well stated. This has been a difficult process that started long before I came on board, but I appreciate all the work that went into it. When I first came to Princeton, I was only going to be here for 1 year. That was the plan. But I really, truly fell in love with Princeton. I've been here more than 20 years now, and I appreciate the opportunity to have that I was able, it was an opportunity to be able to raise my children here. Because it is a wonderful place to live. I don't think anybody would disagree with that Princeton is a wonderful place to live. We take great pride in our diversity. We acknowledge and understand that racially equitable, mixed income communities are stronger, richer, and more vibrant places to live and work. We understand that housing is the foundation for health and well-being, and that affordable housing allows people to live with dignity, quality of life, and with basic access to opportunity for generations to come. And that's what I appreciate living here, is the opportunities that my children have, but I want that for other families as well. So that's what I truly, truly appreciate with the work that has started long before I came, but now I have the opportunity to help move it forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I started down this road when I was on the planning board. There was a joint meeting with council. It was May 20th, 2015. Mr. Cohen was on the planning board with me at that time. It was held in Monument Hall. And in the 4+ years it's taken us to get to this point, we've seen goalposts that have moved constantly. We've heard what Mr. Floyd alluded to, accusations that we somehow didn't want black and brown people in our town. There was a lot of gamesmanship, and there were a lot of heated words. There were tweets at the League of Municipalities conference about something that a previous attorney said. And through it all, I think that we, as a council, and as we added members to council, because this was well underway when I started in 2017, we kept returning to our goals for this. We kept our eye on the ball. There was criticism that this was done behind closed doors. We couldn't address that criticism, but I can tell you that everyone who I served with in my 3 years on council was making a good faith effort to act in the best interest of the town, both in terms of providing affordable housing and also providing it in a smart way that encouraged. Now, is it a perfect plan? It's not. And we're human beings, and I don't think that there's ever going to be a perfect plan. I'd like to give a shout out to Council President Crummiller, who was in every negotiation from the beginning with Councilman Liverman, who's probably at home enjoying his retirement, and then Councilman Cohen. The hours that were put into sometimes very frustrating discussions with multiple parties, and also our mayor, when she was permitted to rejoin the process, just it was a game changer for the entire process. And I know our council here is not going to be sad to see me go, because he bore the brunt of a lot of frustration during closed session. But I think everyone up here, as I said, made a good faith effort to act in the best interest of the town. The extraordinary work that was put in by the mayor and Councilwoman Crummiller and Councilman Cohen is worthy of our gratitude. And now the hard work begins. So good luck.
You've said it all, but if I'm to add anything, I sat here and I listened to the different comments that were made. And even though all those comments are well intentioned, what I've realized in my rookie year here on the council is that with so many cooks around the pot of trying to figure out an affordable housing settlement, I mean, the staff, our attorneys, council, and mayor did a splendid job, because with every idea that came up, there's so many different pros and cons, so many different players. If you move one item, then it could snowball another set of items. Yes, the comments are well intentioned. Yes, they sound good, but they'll work wonderfully in a perfect world. In a world where COA was setting the numbers that of the units we needed to make. In a world where we had we had infinite time to figure it all out. But in the actual world we live in, which is a world with finite time, a world where we have all different players with developers, etc., we have a finite amount of land where we can build. Considering reality, this is a great outcome. And that's why I'm supporting what's on the table tonight.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yeah, I can't add anything that anyone hasn't said, but I do. It was a very long process, and we did work really hard and really explored every challenge deeply. I mean, we looked at everything. We took everything really seriously, and in the end, I feel really good about the plan. It's really gratifying for me, my real last meeting tonight, to be, approving this settlement. And I'm definitely, I support it wholeheartedly. And I thank everyone that we worked with. We did have disagreements, which I feel are healthy. If we didn't have disagreements, we wouldn't have come to such a good process, because when we disagreed, it forced us to confront all of the sides of the issues and really come to a good conclusion. And I also thank Kevin, especially, that it was hard for him because I don't know if all councils argue as much as we do, and sometimes with him. So I'm sorry about that when I did it. So I'm happy to be supporting the resolution.
And yeah, I also want to just thank all my colleagues on council, and I want to thank everybody who commented tonight too, and for your thoughtful questions. One of the things we've tried to attempt with this process is to make it a planning process as much as we can, and this does represent significant growth for the town. And we have had a lot of discussions about how do we think about growing Princeton. And there was a comment earlier about if it's not walkable to the downtown, then it's not walkable. And I think what this plan is going to help as Princeton grows is that there is going to be another center of gravity. And it's not all sidewalks lead to downtown, but there's going to be growth centered around the shopping center. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity in that to benefit everybody in the town. It's especially going to benefit the people who get to live in these new homes. And, you know, we, I think, get into this sort of technical jargon and we talk about units. And I actually hate that word because they're really homes. And when you think about a place like Princeton and about a family who can send their kids to the Princeton Public Schools, it's like this plan on paper is going to change lives, but it also has the potential to transform our community in a way that's really great for all of us. We depend on that Princeton Shopping Center. That is really, for the people who live in this town, that's where we all go to do our errands. And we want it to be healthy and we want it to be vibrant, and we need more people to shop there. And if you have to be driving there, you want to be able to find a parking spot. But wouldn't it be great if, as part of these developments, we're going to improve the pedestrian access, improve the bike access, and just create more energy around there? And, you know, one day we might want to live in the development that's right there, and you can just walk to McCaffrey's. And, you know, it's just, it's exciting to think about how do we grow and how do we do it in a smart way. And even with the Save site, Montgomery is growing down 206. And so I think we also have to think more holistically about where these new centers of energy are going to be. And just because it's at the edge of Princeton doesn't mean that there's like a void at the other. It's not like the, you know, the old maps and you thought that you got to the edge of the map and you fell off the earth. It's like there's a lot of energy up there. There's public transit. It makes sense that we're thinking about that as a place where we want people to live, that they're going to have access to jobs, access to shopping. So we have tried to be thoughtful. It's like it's critical to us that people who are going to be moving into these homes can do so without a car. One of my greatest fears is that we're growing. If every person who moves to Princeton or every person who moves into one of these homes comes with a car, we are in trouble. It's like we want to make room for the people, and we want to do it in a way where they don't all have to come with a car, and that even those of us who are living here, we can afford maybe to shed one of our cars because we're going to have better mobility. So that's the vision. I don't know if we're going to accomplish it all within the next 5 years, but I think it's a start, and I think this plan represents a real opportunity for where we want this town to go and how to grow in a way that's sustainable. So get off my diatribe right now. And we can go to the first resolution, which is 19399, resolution authorizing the execution of a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing. And is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All right. Well, I'm going to say it's moved by Ms. Crumiller, seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any discussion from council? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 19. Next is 19400, resolution designating certain property located on Thanet Road, designated as Lot 4 in Block 5502 on the tax map of Princeton as a non-condemnation redevelopment area and directing the preparation of a redevelopment plan. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Ms. Krummeler. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is Resolution 19401, resolution authorizing a memorandum of understanding for an inclusionary project to be located on Thanet Road, designated as a portion of Lot 4 in Block 5502 on the tax map of Princeton. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Krummeler. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is Resolution 19402, resolution authorizing an affordable housing agreement for Pearl Affordable Housing Project to be located on Thanet Road, designated as a portion of Lot 4 in Block 5502 on the tax map of Princeton. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Williamson. And we're going to hear from this person more, probably at a later date because people are starting to leave. But I did just want to announce that the developer for this project, we're really excited, is Lara Schwager. And her company might be familiar to folks because they're doing a project that's gotten some really positive press in Montgomery. So we'll hear more from Lara in the coming weeks, but we're really excited to have her on board. You just want to stand up and wave to people? All right, there's Lara. Okay, is there any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.